An epic pirate hunt about to begins. A pirate has reached on a mysterious island, also known as the Treasure Island. He had came with an honest crew, but now he wants to kill all of this crew members and get all the treasure by himself. In order to survive, the crew has to hunt down the pirate. But he is not just an ordinary pirate. He is the most furious, clever, and brutal pirate of all. He single-handedly rules the sea, but even worse, the pirate has more people than the crew. Can the crew hunt down this pirate in this epic story of death and betrayal? Or will they be hunted? Watch till the end, because at the end, something happens that will make you stun. So, let's begin our story. In previous video, Jim Hawkins left the crew. So now the story continues from Dr. Livesey's point of view. It was around 1:30 in the afternoon, 3 bells as sailors say, when the 2 pirate boats left the Hispaniola. Their destination was clear, the shore of Treasure Island. While the pirates rowed off, the captain, the squire, and I sat in the cabin, trying to figure out our next steps. We had a solid plan. If there was even a hint of wind, we'd act fast, overpower the 6 mutineers left aboard, cut the anchor line, and sail away. But the sea was eerily calm, and without the wind, we were trapped at the anchorage. Suddenly, Hunter burst into the cabin out of breath. "Jim Hawkins is gone," he cried. "He slipped into one of the boats and went ashore with the others." The news hit us like a punch to the chest. None of us doubted Jim's loyalty. He'd proven himself brave and trustworthy. But knowing the pirate's ruthless nature, we couldn't help but fear for his safety. What if Silver discovered Jim wasn't on his side? What if he got caught in their schemes? It seemed unlikely we'd ever see the boy again. We rushed to the deck. The heat was oppressive, and the stench of the anchorage, a mix of rotting vegetation and swampy air, made my stomach churn. The pitch between the planks on the ship's deck bubbled under the blazing sun. Looking around, we saw the 6 mutineers left aboard. They were lounging under a makeshift awning, grumbling among themselves. Meanwhile, the 2 pirate gigs were tied ashore near the river. One man sat in each boat, lazily keeping watch. One of them was whistling Lili Bolero, a cheerful tune that sounded strangely out of place in such tense circumstances. The waiting was unbearable. After some discussion, it was decided that Hunter and I would take the jolly boat and row ashore to investigate. We set out in the jolly boat, heading in the direction of the stockade marked on the treasure map. It was a tense journey. The pirates guarding their gigs noticed us right away. Their whistling stopped, and they started whispering urgently. For a moment, I thought they might raise the alarm and alert Silver, but after a brief discussion, they stayed put, returning to their whistling as if nothing had happened. The coastline had a slight bend, and I steered the boat carefully to put it between us and the pirates. Once we were out of their sight, I landed and jumped ashore. Armed with 2 pistols and wearing a silk handkerchief under my hat to shield me from the sun, I moved cautiously inland. Not far from the shore, I came across the stockade. It was an impressive structure. Built on a small hill, the log house stood in the center of a large clearing. Surrounding it was a sturdy wooden fence about 6 feet high, strong enough to keep attackers out. The log house itself was built to hold about 40 people in a pinch, with narrow loopholes on each side for musket fire. Inside the fence, a fresh spring bubbled near the top of the hill, a priceless resource on an island like this. Looking at the stockade, I felt a surge of hope. This was the perfect place to defend ourselves if the pirates decided to attack. We had plenty of supplies aboard the Hispaniola, but the ship lacked fresh water. With the stockade's defenses and its spring, we could hold out for days, maybe even weeks if necessary. I was still admiring the stockade when a terrible cry pierced the air. It was the scream of a man in his final moments, filled with pain and fear. My heart froze. Jim Hawkins is gone, I thought. For a moment, I stood paralyzed, my mind racing. But my instincts as a doctor took over. I turned back toward the shore and ran as fast as I could. Hunter was waiting with the jolly boat, and together we rowed back to the Hispaniola with all the speed we could muster. When we arrived, the ship was in chaos. The squire sat pale and silent, guilt written all over his face. He blamed himself for leading us into this mess. One of the mutineers looked equally shaken, as if the man's scream had reminded him of the dangers ahead. Captain Smollett quickly took control of the situation. "We need to move supplies to the stockade," he said. "It's our best chance of survival." We worked fast. Red Ruth was stationed in the gallery, armed with several muskets to watch over the mutineers. Hunter brought the jolly boat to the stern, and Joyce and I began loading it with everything we might need. Muskets, powder, biscuits, barrels of pork, a cask of cognac, and my medical chest. The captain addressed the mutineers with cold authority. "Mr. Hands," he said, "there are 2 of us here with loaded pistols. If any of you makes a signal, that man will be shot." The 6 pirates, clearly intimidated, retreated below deck. As I made my way cautiously through the dense undergrowth, my heart pounded. The stockade was close. I could see its sturdy wooden walls through the trees. But I had to be careful. The pirates were everywhere, their drunken voices carrying through the humid air. One wrong move, and I'd be caught. I crept forward, keeping low, until I reached the edge of the clearing. The Union Jack still flew proudly above the stockade. Relief washed over me. The captain and the others had made it. But before I could step out, a gunshot cracked through the trees behind me. I ducked instinctively and turned to see a pirate, one of Silver's men, stumbling backward, clutching his side. Someone had shot him from the stockade. That was my chance. "Doctor! Captain! It's me, Jim!" I called out, breaking into a sprint. A moment later, the stockade's gate swung open and Hands pulled me inside. I turned to see Dr. Livesey and the squire staring at me in disbelief. "Jim Hawkins!" the squire exclaimed. "By heavens, lad, we thought you were lost." I had to see what they were up to," I gasped, catching my breath. "Silver trusts me, but I couldn't stay with them. I had to get back." The captain placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "You took a great risk, Hawkins, but you've got the devil's own luck, I'll give you that." I looked around. Hunter and Joyce were tending to the wounded, and Red Ruth stood by with a musket in hand, scanning the trees. Supplies were stacked neatly in the stockade, but I could tell they had been through hell just to get this far. "What's the situation?" I asked. The doctor sighed. "We've fortified the place as best we can, but the pirates aren't done with us yet. They've got the Hispaniola, and worse, they've got the Long Nine." As if on cue, a cannon blast thundered from the ship, and a ball sailed over the stockade, crashing into the trees beyond. Sand and debris rained down, but the captain remained steady. "Let them waste their powder," he said calmly. I swallowed hard. I had made it back, but the fight was far from over. As the others busied themselves preparing for the next assault, I tugged at Dr. Livesey's sleeve and pulled him aside. "Doctor," I whispered urgently, "I met someone on the island. Ben Gunn." The doctor's eyes widened. "Ben Gunn?" he repeated in a hushed tone. "A castaway," I explained quickly. "He's been here for years, living off the land." "Well, well," he murmured. "Perhaps fortune is still with us after all." He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Not a word of this to the others. Not yet. We'll need to handle this carefully." I nodded. The pirates were out there. The Hispaniola was under their control, and the stockade was barely holding. But now with Ben Gunn's secret, we just might have a chance. With the jolly boat loaded, we made our first trip to the stockade. The pirates guarding the gigs noticed us but didn't interfere. At the stockade, we worked quickly, tossing supplies over the fence. Joyce stayed behind to guard the stockade, while Hunter and I returned for a second load. This time, one of the pirates left his post at the gigs and disappeared into the woods. I briefly considered destroying their boats to cut off their escape, but the risk of running into Silver's men was too great. We continued our trips back and forth, moving supplies until the stockade was well provisioned. Then, leaving Joyce and Hunter to defend the stockade, I returned to the ship for one last round of supplies. The final trip to the stockade was the most dangerous. The jolly boat was overloaded with 5 grown men, 3 of them over 6 feet tall, in piles of supplies. Water sloshed over the sides, and we had to move carefully to avoid capsizing. As we struggled against the tide, we noticed a new threat. The pirates aboard the Hispaniola had uncovered the Long Nine, a powerful cannon. Worse, they had access to the powder and round shot needed to fire it. "Mr. Trelawney," the captain said, "you're our best marksman. Take a shot at Hands before they can fire." The squire took careful aim, but just as he fired, Hands ducked. The shot missed its target, hitting another pirate instead. The remaining pirates scrambled to load the cannon. Knowing we had little time, we rowed furiously toward the stockade. The cannon fired just as we reached the shallows, sending a shot whistling over our heads. But the force of the shot tipped our overloaded boat, spilling supplies into the water. Soaking wet but unharmed, we waded ashore, leaving behind half of our powder and provisions. We sprinted toward the stockade, the sounds of pirates crashing through the woods behind us. My heart pounded as I heard their shouts drawing closer. At last, we reached the clearing. Joyce and Hunter, stationed inside the stockade, had their muskets ready. As the pirates emerged from the trees, we fired a volley. One of them fell, and the rest retreated into the woods. For the moment, we were safe. Inside the stockade, surrounded by our supplies and armed with muskets, we had a fighting chance. But the pirates weren't far, and we knew they wouldn't give up easily. The enemy paused, clearly surprised by our sudden move. Before they could react, 4 shots rang out. Mine, the squire's, and 2 more from Hunter and Joyce, who were firing from the blockhouse. The shots weren't perfectly timed, but they did what they needed to do. One of the attackers fell to the ground, lifeless. The others turned and ran into the woods without even looking back. We quickly reloaded our guns and went to check on the fallen man. He was dead, shot right through the heart. For a moment, we felt a sense of victory. It seemed like we were finally gaining the upper hand. But just then, a pistol shot cracked from the bushes. I felt the bullet zip past my ear. Poor Tom Redruth, one of our most loyal men, fell to the ground. The squire and I fired back, but we couldn't see anyone to aim at. Our shots were likely wasted. Instead, we hurried to Tom. The captain and Gray were already by his side, trying to help him. But it was clear. It was too late. Tom was dying. It seemed our quick response had scared off the mutineers again. They didn't attack us as we lifted Tom and carried him back inside the stockade. He groaned softly as we moved him, blood soaking his clothes. Tom was one of the oldest members of our group, a tough and loyal servant. Through all our troubles, he had never complained or shown fear. He always followed orders quietly and did his best, no matter the situation. Now, as he lay dying in the log house, he spoke with the same calm courage. The squire knelt by Tom's side, his face wet with tears. "Tom, forgive me," he said, his voice shaking. Tom gave a small smile and replied, "Would that be proper, sir? But so be it. Amen." Then after a pause, Tom asked if someone could say a prayer for him. "It's the custom," he said softly, as if apologizing for asking. Not long after that, Tom passed away without another word. The captain, always steady and composed, brought over another flag, the Union Jack. He carefully draped it over Tom's body. "Don't worry yourself, sir," he said to the squire. "Tom did his duty, and he's at peace now." A moment later, the captain turned to me. "Doctor, how long until Blandley sends the ship to find us?" he asked. I told him we had to hold out until the end of August, months away. Hearing this, the captain frowned. "That's a long time, and with the rations we have, it's going to be difficult." "Truth be told," he added grimly, "it's probably better we have one less mouth to feed." He glanced at Tom's lifeless body under the flag. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the air. A cannonball flew over the stockade and landed deep in the woods. The pirates were firing at us from the ship. Another shot followed, this one landing inside the stockade, spraying sand everywhere. "Let them waste their powder," the captain said calmly as the cannon fire continued. The squire suggested taking down the British flag, thinking it might stop the pirates from aiming at us. But the captain firmly refused. "Strike my colors, never," he declared. His boldness lifted our spirits. Even though the cannonballs kept coming, we began to feel braver. Most of the shots missed or buried themselves harmlessly in the sand. One ball did punch through the roof and out the floor, but no one was hurt. We started treating the cannon fire like a strange, noisy game. By the time night fell, the captain had us all working. 2 men went to gather firewood, others dug a grave for poor Tom, and the doctor was put in charge of cooking. I stood guard at the door, keeping watch for any movement outside. The captain kept walking between us, encouraging everyone, and lending a hand where needed. From time to time, the doctor stepped out to check on me. At one point, he sighed and said, "Captain Smollett is a better man than I am. And when I say that, it means something." Later, he looked at me curiously and asked, "Jim, do you think Ben Gunn is sane?" "I don't know, sir," I replied honestly. "He's a strange one." "Well," the doctor said, 3 years alone on an island could drive anyone mad. But remember, Jim, he likes cheese. I've got a piece of Parmesan cheese in my snuff box. That'll be for him." Before we ate dinner, we buried Tom Redruth. The cool breeze whipped through the air as we stood silently around his grave, paying our respects. It was a sad moment, but we had to stay focused. Supplies were running low, and we needed every bit of firewood we could gather. Later that night, the captain, the squire, and the doctor talked quietly in a corner. They were trying to figure out what to do. The situation was grim. Our food would only last about 10 days, and there was no telling when help would arrive. The plan was simple but dangerous. Pick off the mutineers one by one and hope the harsh conditions and their love for rum would do the rest. That night, as I lay down to sleep, I heard the pirates singing and laughing loudly from their camp. It was clear they were drunk. The doctor was confident that between the rum and the island's tough climate, the pirates wouldn't last long. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices. "Flag of truce!" someone called out. Rubbing my eyes, I ran to look. To my shock, I saw none other than Long John Silver himself, walking toward the stockade. The crew has fortified the stockade, but the pirates are closing in, their thirst for treasure pushing them to deadly extremes. As Silver's men prepare for their next move, Jim makes a shocking discovery that could change everything. Will the stronghold survive, or is it too late? And with danger on the horizon, what choice will Jim make? One that could seal their fate? You won't believe what happens next. Tune in, because the next chapter will leave you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe now, and don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the story. And if you want to be part of our next adventure, make sure to leave a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment. Check the playlist or click on the next video to watch. I will see you there.